Barrie City Council kicked off the new year last night. In these recap videos, I'll keep it short. I'll be rolling the tape of virtual council. My preamble will give you a primer on the issues discussed, and then I'll roll select parts of the discussion. I've cut out the motions, presentations, and more to keep it relatively short. I've also noted down skip 2 times in the video description, so if you want the discussion highlights of a specific issue, check below for details. First off, Council heard deputations, people speaking to the council about issues facing the city. Usually these have to do with issues currently on the table at council. Tonight was no different. The issue, development at Bradford and Checkley Street. That's the 1900 unit development on Barrie's waterfront. As you'll hear in these conversations, the height and the size was the key issue. As well, however, is how council communicated the planning process to the public. After the deputations, you'll hear council discuss amendments to the zoning bylaws and vote on the motion as well. Council voted in favor of amending the zoning restrictions. This clears the way for development to go ahead.
First, I do not believe the environmental area on this property should be impacted in any way by this development. The other issues pertaining to this proposal have been raised from the very first public meeting and have never been off the public's mind since. The over-intensification will have an impact on traffic, people, parklands, and personal space of existing Barrie residents. Contrary to many councillors' thoughts that smart centers or our ward councillor had engaged with the affected residents in public meetings, I have not heard or are aware of any public meetings, and I've spoken to many people in our buildings with the residents that took place. We do not need councillors to be cheerleaders for smart centers and worry about their investment profits.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Mr. McLaren, did I hear you say correctly that to your understanding, there have been no public meetings or public consultation formal for this project? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you did. I spoke to many of the residents in our 2 condos, 33 and 37, and nobody that I have spoken to has any public meetings outside of the one public meeting that was held.
Okay, I appreciate it. So to clarify, you're wrong. Mayor Lehman clarifies when we have these public meetings, goes to our director of planner and says, Ms. Banfield, has this application been done in accordance with the statutory public meetings? So I would, it's not to shame you to say you're wrong. I just need to clarify. I think both for the integrity of the planning department, for Councillor Alwyn, and for this whole process. So maybe after offline, Ms. Cook could direct you to the meetings that were held.
Staff can certainly follow up with you, Mr. McLaren. We have your contact details from tonight. There were a number of meetings, and there is sort of standard procedure around how developments are notified. But to Councillor Morales's point, you know, those we're always interested in having comments as to whether those were effective in engaging people in the process, and obviously you're concerned that they weren't.
Again, I ask, why do we as residents who care about our city attend workshops, neighborhood meetings, public meetings, provide written submissions, fill out surveys, only to have this effort fall on deaf ears?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Yes, I'll try to form it in a question. Thank you, Ms. Colbatch, for your deputation. I guess I just wanted to highlight or clarify that, you know, you mentioned something about democracy, and that there are people that have come forward and are voicing their concerns with the height, that there are other people that do want to see this happen and are completely okay with the original height that we had presented to the city. So I'm just curious why you are saying that democracy isn't being righted when clearly, you know, all city council works, I'll speak on myself, but I know that all city council works really hard to listen to all sides and to really find a medium place, but there are pros and cons to every development. And there are a number of residents and businesses that do want to see this occur.
Thank you, Councillor Harris, for your question. I think really there are far more people and residents throughout the city of Barrie that are not interested in having the height not the intensification part of it. We've had many, many people come out to public meetings, neighborhood meetings, do written submissions that say that, in fact, they're okay with the intensification. It's really all about the height.
Now we're on to the Checkley Street matter. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Ward, if you could introduce it.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section C, the Planning Committee report dated December 15, 2020 is circulated to be adopted.
Thank you. It is moved by Deputy Mayor Ward and seconded by Councillor Thompson that Section C of the Planning Committee report dated December 15th, 2020 is circulated to be adopted. This is the application for the OPA and zoning bylaw amendment for 51 and 74 Bradford Street and 20 Checkley Street. Apologies again, members of council. That is on the floor. Councillor Aylwin, would you care to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And I would like to thank the deputants who spoke earlier, Ms. Colbatch and Mr. McLaren, and also thank Mr. McLaren for his apology and clarification, although I don't think it was necessary because I understand, these things can get lost. And I, like Mayor Lehman said, I do the feedback that we can always improve the way we reach out to residents on these matters to make sure that everyone knows what's going on. And like Mr. McLaren said, not all are going to be happy with this proposal, and we need to strike a balance. And I think we have done that. I know that there is a lot of opposition from people who live in the immediate vicinity of the proposal. And that's balanced against, the desire from many in the broader community, certainly in the business community in the downtown, for more people living in and around the downtown. We know that Barrie has to grow. The province sets our growth targets, and we need to make sure that that growth is sustainable, both environmentally and economically. And intensification does allow us to do that.
That aren't going to be having vehicles that would have the opportunity to come into our downtown. We're going to have to take those 200 to 400 people and put them somewhere else. And that's going to be urban sprawl. I'm disappointed in some council members who I really thought had an environmental strong point, that this is really an environmental issue. For me, it's also an issue to generate more people in our downtown.
I do agree that we have spent a fair bit of time on this one. We've worked as a council, we've do an awful lot of people through the process. I'm a little, I've been watching this thing and it's been going up and down a bit like a yo-yo. The first proposal was 40 stories, 42 stories, and 38 stories. The planning report came back with a higher number, 46, 38, and 36. And then we got a letter from Smart Centers after we'd had quite a bit of discussion, and we'd asked staff to have a look at lowering the units. And that report came, or the offer that we got from Smart Centers was 36, 38, and 35, which I thought, I wasn't entirely happy with, but I thought we were moving in the right direction. And now we seem to have before us 41, 38, and 35. So it's gone up again. And I guess I'm struggling with this one because we need to intensify the downtown. But I think that we also need to keep what we're building in character and in scale with what we have, excuse me, with what we have there. I'm actually going to join Councillor McCann in voting no, and I'm doing that because I don't think we should be going back up above what the Smart Centers in their letter to us said that they would be content with. So.
And I believe that these buildings similarly will be a very positive impact on the west end of our downtown, on our community and our plans for revitalizing the core area of our city overall. And I believe the changes that were made to the front building, which is truly a waterfront building, have improved, not to the satisfaction of everyone, but have improved the development proposal that is in front of council tonight. So I will thank everybody who's been involved in that process. There were many at many different meetings, and the developer as well for being part of the process. But I'll certainly be supporting this tonight.
And I'm starting with you tonight.
Yes.
Councillor Rietma,
No.
Councillor Aylwin,
Yes.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ward,
Yes.
Councillor Thompson,
Yes.
Councillor Natalie Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Harvey,
Yes.
Councillor Jim Harris,
Yes.
Councillor Morales,
Yes.
and Councillor McCann.
We,
The motion carries.
Council also heard from service partners as they presented their budgets for 2021. First up was the Barrie Police Service. Chief Greenwood spoke for the service, explaining the 2.65% increase over 2020's budget. I'll skip her presentation and go right to the discussion. Note that this isn't a vote on the budget. Further discussion happens next week. Councillor Kungle asked about major new aspect of police expenses, a next generation 911 call system. Councillor Alwyn pushed into the funding for a new body camera program, as well as asking why the police service could not cut costs further this year. Next, Councillor Rietma asked about activity-based reporting for the Barrie Police Service.
The Police Services Board has determined that the municipal funding required to provide an adequate and effective police service without impacting the current service levels in 2021 is comprised of an operational budget in the amount of $52.4 million, a capital request in the amount of $1.8 million, and the impact of legislative items in the amount of $2.9 million, for a total municipal funding request of $57.2 million. This represents a 2.65 increase from our 2020 budget of last year.
The multi-year expense to the next gen 911, and it was stated that starting in 2021, the proportion of that allocation was 235,000, but that would be a multi-year cost going to 2024. Can assume that that's an even split of the overall cost over those years, or is that something that may increase over time? Is that an equal cost that we can expect in your budget to 2024?
In 2020, we invested $550,000 last year. So we commenced with a capital budget. We're able to place funds into reserve. And this year, we are accounting for $235,000. And over the multi-years until 2024, anticipate that next year's contribution and the following year's contribution will be more than the $235,000 that we invested. Mandatory and a requirement for all first responder system running by early 24.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And thank you, Chief Greenwood, for the presentation, and Mr. Ferguson as well for being here. A couple different questions. The first is around the body-worn cameras, which is around 8% of the capital budget request at $140,000. Is that only, or is that a rollout of the entire program?
Thank you very much, Councillor Alwyn. The body-worn cameras, we have been working with the provider for the body-worn cameras. It is a multi-year program. And in next year, well, this year of 2021, the $140,000 will equip 140 frontline officers for the project. So it's a combination, and we have commenced the pilot project at the latter part of last year. So it's a combination of a pilot project and then the equipment once we are able to go live.
My second question is around the grants and secondments. I believe it was slide 7. And there's a figure there, reduction of $959,000 since 2019 from provincial grant programs. I think I need some clarification here, because I do remember the the downloading from the provincial government in terms of, cutting the grants for the court security prisoner transportation grant. But then I also remember our members of provincial parliament making a big announcement that that wasn't actually the case and that they are actually funding that grant. So I think I just need some clarification if possible. Was there a cut to the provincial grant? If so, how significant? And what was that funding that was announced with big fanfare from the MPPs?
In 2018, when there was a review of the grant funding formula, we were impacted by that review that was conducted. So in 2019, as a service, we received $3.4 million to run the court security prisoner transportation service to support court services for Barrie Police, the OPP, South Simcoe Police Service, Rama Police, and the Military Police. In 2020, our funding that we received for this core service, we received $2.7 million. And in 2021, we will also be receiving $2.7 million. So from a funding perspective there, we see just over $700,000 there. And the other area of core funding that we saw a reduction in was in regards to the community safety and policing grant. And we had in 2019, $812,000 allocated there. And in 2020 received $609,000. And in 2021, we are again receiving $609,000. So in totality, between those two core funding streams that we received, it's $959,000 that we are no longer receiving to deliver core police services. We have been very fortunate where we have received other core funding, but other funds from the government in regards to things such as our RIDE grant funding. We have been successful with grant applications and receiving funds for through the Proceeds of Crime grant. We also have received funding through the provincial strategy to support our work in human trafficking.
Okay, thank you. I really, really appreciate that clarification because I was definitely confused hearing different things from the province, hearing about the grants. So it's good to know that there's almost $1 million provincial downloading happening here. And that's an impact on our municipal taxpayers from cuts to services from the province. So that's good to have that clarity. I appreciate that. My final question is a broader question. So the City of Toronto police this year came in with a 0% increase. And the chief said something along the lines of, we are committed, we heard the community, we're committed to doing more with less. Why can't the Barrie Police Service do the same?
So we do look at police service and see what the comparators are and look at the funding models that they have. When we look to the Toronto Police Service, for example, their operating budget is set from their capital budget. So when they're talking about a 0% increase, I believe that they're focusing in on the operational budget. And this year they are going to be utilizing some of the reserves that they have in their operating budget. When we brought forward to the board in September with our presentation, the Police Services Board had some grave concerns in regards to future sustainability. We know that we've had discussions on the funding model for policing, and we've been doing this for years. We've had larger discussions at all levels of government, and we know that as a society that we need to adequately support social and health services, which we know have been underfunded or have seen significant cuts to their budget. And we are committed to work with the government and our community partners on meeting the safety and well-being needs of those in our community.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Mayor Lehman, for you to Chief Greenwood. Thank you, Chief Greenwood, for your presentation. I wasn't going to ask a question, but I'm always curious about policing and the work you do and the connection between social services. So I will ask one. I recently had a conversation with the folks at 310 COPE and York Support Services Network and the crisis team there, and talking about a call diversion unit. You mentioned about diversion, working with community partners, and I agree with you around before we cut something, let's build something to manage the gap that would occur otherwise. So there's a model out of Houston, Texas, this call diversion unit process where they, through the police services, line, you connect more to a system that would, drill down on the call to see who should really go out. And it might not be that you would send out officers per se, you'd send out social services of some nature. Is that part of the long-term or the short-term strategy around that call diversion you mentioned and the connection to social services?
Your worship, through to Councillor Harris, we, through our evidence-based review of our calls for service, one of the areas that we're certainly spending a lot of time reviewing is the opportunity for the mobile crisis response team. We're also looking at the CAHOOTS program that is run in the United States, and an assertive community treatment teams, the Reach Out Response Network, and all of them have a proactive complement to them. Many are civilian members that are hired by the police service, and they are dispatched through the computer-aided dispatch, as we all would be as police officers. So this.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Chief Greenwood, is there a police currently response to that Barrie bylaw, in your opinion, could start picking up? It's been a while since I checked in, but I think dog calls, like barking dogs, used to be a police thing, not a bylaw thing. I don't know if that's transferred over. Is there anything that we can shuffle, or not shuffle, reallocate properly? This question, reallocate more effectively, that would allow your officers to respond more appropriately to calls that they are trained for and would possibly see cost savings?
Mayor Lehman, through to Councillor Morales. Thank you very much for that question. When we look at what we have experienced since March of this year during the pandemic response, we have a very good working relationship with our bylaw officers and the section of the city that is responsible for our public health response as a result of COVID. We do work very closely with our bylaw officers in regards to the traditional noise complaints, and we do and have performed special projects to address some of the noise complaints. And we do work with the city in regards to things such as landlord and tenant, noise complaints, dogs complaints, and it is something that we have had regular conversations to address those calls to see if it is appropriate to divert them to our bylaw enforcement officers through the city of Barrie.
So hearing what I just heard, so correct me if I'm wrong, so police determines whether they should go to a dog call and a noise call. Let's stick to those. And if they can determine that they don't need police will stop attending a certain household, and it will just then always be bylaw. Is that correct?
Bylaw.
For those two calls, only for dog and noise.
So there are some noise complaints that may involve violence. So when we're assessing, there are no safety concerns related to that. We are also a service that runs 24/7. So we are available at times to respond to noise complaints and dog you had identified. So we are a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, around-the-clock response. So do we respond to those if bylaw are not scheduled to be working? But that is one or several of the calls that we will be evaluating in the diversion and alternative response.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, Chief. On slide 10, you budget broken series of bucket operational services, operational support. I'm interested, and I think our public is interested in sort of some different buckets. And I'm wondering if you can give us something along those lines. For example, what percentage of our budget is spent on traffic control? What percentage is related to drugs and drug enforcement? Percentage is kind of social services. Do you have any sense of kind of what those buckets might be?
Mary Lehman to Council Rietma. The way in which the Barrie Police Service allocates our fund is illustrated in the slide before you. We do not calculate for, I will use one example, the drug-related costs that we incur as a city and the impact that it has on our community.
Next, here's a brief version of the Barrie Public Library's report to Council.
We've been doing our part to stop the spread by hitting pause on in-person programming during the pandemic. That hasn't stopped us from engaging our patrons online. In the first 30 days of closure alone, over 500 residents signed up for a library card. To support our new and existing patrons, we took to the internet. Using a wide range of platforms, Facebook Live, Zoom, and conference calls, we shared over 1,300 programs with more than 24,000 people. This success may change how we deliver programs for good, at least to some extent. For example, our Baby Goose program has seen great success delivered in an online format. The digital format allows caregivers and their babies to participate without leaving the house. For some, like new parents, a virtual environment offers a convenient way to connect. That being said, one of the things I'm missing most is the sound of story time outside my office.
So let's look ahead. The board has determined that the municipal funding required to maintain adequate and effective library service in 2021 is $162,000 2020 municipal grant. This is a base increase of 1.95%, a modest figure that is in line with the direction provided by City Council. This year, the Library Board is also asking Council to approve $724,000 that will allow the board to extend library services into the Holly neighborhood, as we discussed with Council in early November. For years, library staff members have found creative ways to bring the library to Holly, but story time in the park is maybe not enough. This year especially, we've shown how creative and flexible we can be. Think of what more we could do for this area if we had a dedicated community. A library in Holly strongly supports Council's goal to build strong neighborhoods. Public libraries encourage human connection, inspire community participation, and shape the way people interact. As we recover from the pandemic, a library could help build for a stronger Holly. With isolation at an all-time high, welcoming public spaces encourage companionship for older adults, provide early literacy resources for busy young families, language instruction for newcomers, collaborative learning opportunities for entrepreneurs, and inclusive public spaces for all citizens. As we shared with you in November, the library has the opportunity to lease a space in an local library services to Holly. With space limitations and economic factors in mind, we've scaled this project to meet current needs with the possibility of expansion in the future. A 4,500 square foot space is available in the Mapleton and Essa area. This would put the library in the heart of the community in a spot that is busy, walkable, and close to other amenities such as the Holly Rec Center and schools. This boutique model provides convenient and ready access to library services for a community that has been waiting more than 10 years for a library in their neighborhood. If Council approves this request, we could have a library up and running by early summer at a time when citizens are turning to the library for support. Following our presentation on November 9th, Library Management was advised by several members of Council to carefully examine the proposed Holly Library operating budget and to look for areas where further efficiencies could be found. Through further evaluation, we have been able to achieve an additional savings of 15% over the budget presented in November. We have proactively prepared our organization for growth and the expansion of services. We have found efficiencies in our workflows, modernized our policies, removed barriers to access, and streamlined our staffing model. Some cost savings may also be achieved depending on timing of opening. However, exact amounts will not be known until the lease can be negotiated. The one-time capital costs shown here can be funded from various sources, including development charges, municipal and/or library reserves or library fundraised dollars. Development charges can also be used to fund the annual lease costs this year and going forward. It is also important to note that our capital costs are for items like shelving, collections, and furniture that could come with us if we were to relocate to a larger space in the future. We are prepared for and excited to grow Barrie's library system, and we're asking for council's support to provide expanded service to this neighborhood. The library board and staff have worked hard to prepare a flexible and creative budget, and we are asking for council's support by approving our 2021 request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell.
I thought you did quite an impressive job scaling it back to still provide something from a community benefit. So a 15% reduction, I'd like to applaud you on that, but I also would love to hear if there was an area where you found efficiencies. We had conversations at the time about, leveraging volunteers, infrastructure, the parking lot and size of the building. So could you give us any insight into how you were able to attain that?
For sure. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle.
Things considered, even the new programs will continue on, even in this new space, into perhaps new mission.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle. We haven't had to really scale back in terms of any programming. Now, obviously, during the pandemic, our ability to offer in-person programming is limited, none. So there's certainly that, but in terms of program reductions to make this work, no, we will not have to reduce our programming.
My main question is actually for Mr. Miller when it comes to because I think the big question that members of council are probably going to have is the funding formula that we can use to make this become a reality. And I just want to clarify for members of council that when it comes to funding this new branch, that we do have dedicated library reserves specifically for this, and that the only component of this moving forward that would have any effect on the direct tax rate would be the salaries involved in operating this particular location. If you're able to either clarify or expand on that, that would be great.
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey. So I believe you're making reference to the development charges used to, as this is a lease, development charges could be used to finance the lease costs.
The County of Simcoe also presented their budget to council Monday night. This budget is really affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. That's because Simcoe covers many social services and operates long-term care homes in the province. I'll skip the budget presentation. You can find it at the link below this video. But here are a few key conversations. Councillor Natalie Harris asked about vaccinations. When will first responders get it? And next, Councillor Alwyn asked about social housing budget in Simcoe. Why are subsidies down for that? He also mentions concerns about homelessness, the large numbers of people living rough in downtown Barrie. How will funding from the county address these needs? Lastly, you'll hear a part of the conversation between Councillor Morales and representative of the county. It's an interesting conversation about service arrangements. How can Barrie be sure they are not shouldering the financial load of services being offered to municipalities across Simcoe?
I'm not sure who to direct this question to, but I'm just wondering if there is a date allotted to when paramedic services will receive their vaccines.
That would be a great question for, I think, General Manager Jane Sinclair. Thank you.
Ms. Sinclair. I thought so. Hi, Jane.
Good evening, Your Worship, and good evening, council members. We don't have a date at this point in time. We have had some of our paramedics engaged in supporting the vaccine clinic, working with the Royal Victoria Regional Health Center and Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit, and they will be involved in assisting in the vaccinations in long-term care homes. And so we're working at this point to register those individual paramedics for vaccinations, but we are eagerly awaiting to hear when the entire workforce will be eligible for those vaccines.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I do have a couple questions. The first is around the social housing portion of the budget. You had mentioned that the operating budget for social housing is down because subsidies are down. And I was surprised to hear that, actually. Do you know the reason why that is?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Elwin. For the nonprofit providers, we receive provincial indices every year that we base our subsidies on to the nonprofit providers. And one of the key pieces or factors for the indices changed this year, and that was related largely to the rent being held at 0%. And so that affected the formula and the indices that we receive to guide our budgeting and our funding to the nonprofits.
And my second question is around homelessness prevention. This morning, I was on a call with Barrie Police and a shelter provider, and there were concerns raised about the sheer number of people living rough in downtown Barrie right now, estimated around 45 to 55 people. Recognizing that we have the hotel model of emergency shelter right now, which has, in terms of keeping people safe from COVID-19, but that also comes with higher barriers to access because it is on private property at a hotel versus being at the property of a shelter. So I'm wondering if there are ways that the city of Barrie, as a service partner with the county, if we can support the work that you're doing or augment the work that you're doing to prevent homelessness and to get people into supportive housing, because I'm extremely concerned about the sheer number of people that we're seeing, and I think we need to do everything that we can to prevent people living rough in the middle of winter. So wondering if there are ways that we can help. What may be the cause of seeing the sheer number of people that we see downtown? It's certainly more visible than I think I've ever seen. So wondering if you have some thoughts there.
We have experienced through the emergency homeless shelters in particular, but also the other partners that we work with and provide funding to, have experienced and observed an increase in homelessness. And that's something that's true across the province and the nation as a result of the pandemic. One of the items that, or one of the factors involved in that includes an inopportunity to, or inability in some cases, to couch surf or use homes, so families or friends, and so that with COVID became a challenge. Also, the individuals increasing frustrations has been a factor through the pandemic. With respect to the shelter capacity, and I appreciate your comments about the motel model, there continues to be capacity. We have seen an increase and certainly are concerned about the number of folks living rough, and the outreach team that is funded by the county through provincial and federal funding through the Busby Street Center has been encouraging people to come into shelter, and we continue to have opportunities through the motel system where the Busby Center is engaging in another hotel rooms or suite of rooms to address this particular matter. There are some cases where individuals aren't always in a position where they would welcome coming in, and there are a number of complex reasons for that. There are also some additional standards that have been put in place because of the pandemic with respect to the motel model. They're not high barrier. They're very similar to what it would be if the emergency shelters were continuing to operate. One example is due to public health, the shelter providers are asking individuals not to be traveling, not to travel to Toronto, not to travel out and visit people, just as we all are trying to remain isolated, especially during the lockdown. So that's one example of a challenge that some individuals are facing if they're not in a position where they're able to abide by those standards. We are concerned about the increasing numbers. We have increased the outreach support to the service agency, and we also have authorized any additional motel funding available for those folks as well.
The asks I get are COVID related significantly by the magnitude that we saw in those numbers. But I think this is one of those things that every year, I think, and I've only been around for 6, obviously there's been many years before this, but councilors kind of looked at this budget and went, I'm not happy with the numbers in Barrie at least, but we'll make do. And it's almost dissatisfaction by 1,000, but by 1,000 cuts, to the point where I'm looking at these numbers and in our strategic session in December, looking at the needs and gaps we have to fill with housing in the city of Barrie. Well, you want to do a project? Maybe we buy land. Maybe we give another donation to the Busby Center. Maybe we do these different little projects that's coming from municipal tax dollars. And then I look at the county budget and I go, a lot of these services the county should be doing, but the county is doing these capital projects in Aurelia, in Collingwood, in other ends of the city. So essentially, and I'm not saying that's malicious, so it's definitely not personal, but in essence, I'm looking at it from a Barrie lens going, our monies that we're giving, and every year we get asked to give more, are being sent to other municipalities. So we're essentially subsidizing operation of other municipalities and not getting our bang for our buck. And it's a little bit problematic. I know I am not Bradford, but from what I read and interpreted and followed the story, they felt a little bit of a similar bang for buck. And the other thing that is also concerning for me is Barrie, since it's the urban node in the county. In short, I'm sure there's more color to it. People from other municipalities that might need social services gravitate towards Barrie, settle, live, try to locate in Barrie. And unless we have really good data, it can be easy to interpret them as Barrie data points, as Barrie people, where in reality, that my notion that we are subsidizing operations in other places of the county, it's probably to a greater magnitude. That number is actually probably higher, because even the Barrie numbers that we think are Barrie numbers are actually Collingwood population, or actually Aurelia. So my question to you is, how can the county strive towards providing a more equitable, fair distribution of services and investments for the city of Barrie, pay and contribute to you guys every year, so that we are not accidentally, as councillors, subsidizing operations for other municipalities?
Mr. Wilcox?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure you're happy to pass that one on. I will begin, and I think my colleagues will probably jump in. I think we could share with you that we hear a similar tone even in the opposite direction. So there are a substantial amount of services that are taking place in the city of Barrie and for the city of Barrie, because it is, as you say, the urban node within our region. I will ask Mr. Bishop to comment regarding to Ontario Works. Ms. Sinclair can comment specifically on paramedics. We have invested substantial dollars in terms of capital over the last several years. And we looked just last year to the Barrie Emergency Services Campus as a significant investment that is sitting in the city of Barrie and benefiting in terms of the response times within the city of Barrie compared to the rest of the county. The shared services that we provide regarding Ontario Works, we have a significant investment in staff that work and provide service in the city of Barrie. So I believe that there is a point to be made to that, and that the way that is worked is with the municipal services agreement, which is worked out in 5-year chunks. So the one that we're working on right now goes until the end of 2022. That really is the opportunity, if you feel that there is a need to change, that we could change the way that is structured in terms of the allocation methodology, of what service costs, etc. But the right out now that's an agreement that was put in place between the parties, which is the city of Orillia, the city of Barrie, and the County of Simcoe, and does specifically go to the points that you're talking about in terms of how the costs are allocated in the most equitable way. I would argue that this is different than the Bradford, West Gwillimbury type issue. Their complaint largely has been around the tax system and how the tax system is based upon municipal weighted taxable assessment. And their taxable assessment is growing faster than the rest of the county because they're in the southern part of the county, and therefore their weighting is growing in terms of that. But that is our tax system, and that's not something that the county can easily shift or change. I'd like to invite Greg or Jane to comment if I've misspoken or if there's anything to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Wilcox. I can maybe comment very quickly on paramedic services because I think there's a couple of really good examples that can illustrate just what Mr. has outlined. So if we look at call volume, so you look at the number of calls, emergency 911 calls that we receive across the region. The forecast for 2020 was total of about 76,000, receiving about 25,000 of those calls in the city of Barrie. And when you look at, and then the projections for year end 29,000, which is approximately 34% of the entire calls across the entire region. So all 16 county municipalities, cities of Barrie and cities of Orillia. So we actually invest significant portion of our operations to respond to the 911 medical calls in the city of Barrie, more than the actual weighted assessment portion, which part of it is because it's a large urban center and there's more calls per geography, but that's an example of significant investment in emergency response to residents living in the city of Barrie. And in terms of our actual response times, city of Barrie is amongst the shortest or the best response times. Again, a lot of it has to do with the call volume and the urban nature of your community, but there's significant investment in response time to your area. And the other quick example to illustrate is the capital planning. Mr. Wilcox talked about the emergency services hub that we just opened, and we were very pleased to partner with the city of Barrie. That was a significant investment of $26 million for the County of Simcoe. And it's part of a long-term asset planning model. So albeit we have different smaller paramedic service station developments, again, we have completed a really significant investment in the city of Barrie because of the nature of the calls and our resources in this particular area. And in fact, we're actually continuing to invest capital in 2021 with the development of the Ross Street hub and spoke model. So it's a small drive-through spoke that we call it, that is part of that large emergency services hub. In fact, we have about 5 spoke models that we are developing and completing as part of our paramedic services capital asset planning. So those are a couple of examples of how we are certainly investing on a region-wide basis and providing a significant resource and support to City of Barrie. So I hope that's helpful. And I would turn it to Mr. Bishop, who may have some similar examples in his area.
Thank you, Jane, and through you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you for the question, Councillor Morales. The approach within social services, with respect, I guess I could talk about it in a couple different ways. For childcare system management and funding, as well as childcare fee subsidies, so that's the actual direct delivery for families in need, and also Ontario Works and homelessness service and related supports. That is the bulk of that funding that we receive from the province, and in some cases the federal government, does go to support the need in Barrie. We do look at our service delivery though from a regional system approach, but certainly recognize that larger urban centers have greater needs with respect to social services. Your example around capital affordable housing rental construction is a bit different from what I just shared. So having said that, we also are looking at ways that we can support the 10-year housing and homelessness prevention strategy and targets, because there's a need across the entire region. I will mention to council, I think I've shared this before, we did receive direction from council to from County Council to sell our scattered units. That's the individual semi and detached homes that are part of the social housing portfolio, and put proceeds towards the purchase and development of a new affordable housing build of a significant one in Barrie. And that would be in addition to the other third-party developments that have received federal and provincial funding also in the last since 2015, and some of which are in Barrie. So we are actually have been looking in Barrie for an ideal location, close proximity to services, something that would also be able to house our Ontario Works and Children's Services staffing area. As you know, we do currently lease out of 136 Bayfield Street, and we have 75, well, about 75 staff in that location, combined with OW as well as Children's Services. And so we'd like to look at a model that includes a bit of a hub approach, as well as being co-located with an affordable housing build. And so we're actively pursuing property, and I can't really get into further details around acquisition at this point, but it is looking promising.
Okay, those were the major parts of City Council this week. For a full report on what happened, check out the link below to watch the full proceedings on YouTube.